I got a lot of people asking for a more in-depth tutorial for my Sentro cardigan, so here it is. I didn't want to make the exact same design over again, so I made a few improvements and it's a little bit different. This one is single knit and striped and also uses crochet to make the ribbing. I'm going to be making a US size medium, but you can adjust the number of stitches to suit your size. For materials, you're going to need a 48 pin circular knitting machine, 350 grams of medium weight yarn in your primary color, and 150 grams of medium weight yarn in your secondary color, a yarn needle, some stitch markers or safety pins, and 3 to 4 1-inch buttons. Also, optionally, if you wanted to make this a fully knit cardigan rather than have crochet for the trim, you can do that with a circular knitting needle. To start, I'm going to be making the sleeves first since this will be the easiest section, as we'll be using the tube setting and the machine's built-in row counter. Then I'll make the back panels using the panel setting and keep the count of the rows on my phone. And lastly, the front panels, and around halfway through I will start decreasing on one side to create a neckline. Then I'll make the cuffs with my crochet hook. Next, the trim around the front and neck, as well as include the buttonholes, then the bottom ribbing, and finish off by adding the buttons. With the machine set to tube, I started my cast on. To cast on the sleeves, I just guided the yarn, one in front and one behind each hook. So you can see that the tail end is on the inside with some excess, and I have the working end of the yarn in my hand, and that's what's being guided through the hooks. So I just continue until I get all the way to the start of the round. Once I'm there, I just place my yarn into the yarn guide. From there, I did 8 rows in the primary color. By the way, I am tensioning by hand here because I broke my tension guide, but I've since ordered a replacement. It just hasn't come in the mail yet, but if you're following along with the tension guide, I would recommend using the tight or moderate setting. To create the first stripe, I removed the primary color from the yarn guide and placed the yarn in the center of the machine just so it's out of the way. And then I placed the tail end of the secondary color over the current hook and put the working end into the yarn guide. Later, after casting off, I'll create a loose knot with that tail end to secure it. And then for the white stripe, I do 2 rounds. To switch back, I'll place my secondary yarn in the center of the machine, take my primary color out, and place it in the yarn guide again. Here I accidentally turned a bit past my first hook, so I just used a needle to push the yarn into the yarn guide, making sure that the yarn is also included in those first couple hooks. Now I'll just repeat this process of 8 rows in the primary color, 2 rows in the secondary color, until I have the length I want for my sleeves. As for the length, I found that my diagram was correct in making 18 inches with 86 rows, but it was a bit too long for me, especially with the cuffs. So if you're around 5'2", I would recommend making it 66 rows instead, because according to the Vitruvian Man, your wingspan is about the same as your height. So that's what I'm going off of. Also, because this is a drop shoulder cardigan, the sleeves will actually start lower and it'll have the added length of the cuffs. So this section actually doesn't have to be the full length of your arm. Once you have your desired sleeve length, you can cut your yarns with excess and thread it through a needle. And to cast off, I removed the yarn from the yarn guide, I turn past some hooks and then pick up those loops through the back of those hooks, and repeat until your work is fully off the machine. To finish the edges of anything I make off of a knitting machine, I usually place a slip stitch in every loop so that the edges are nice and controlled. So here's an example on a panel since I didn't record it for the tube. First, I make a slip knot on a crochet hook. I'm using a 5mm crochet hook, and I start slip stitching from the opposite side of the cast off yarn. Once I place a slip knot in every loop, I chain 1 if it's a panel to finish it, or I'll slip stitch into the start of the round if it's a tube. Then I will cut and pull this yarn through, and after that I pull the cast off yarn out of this row. And to secure it, I usually tie together the crochet yarn and the cast off yarn together and then weave them in, just so that there's less to do at the end. And then I'll leave the working yarn that I was slip stitching with long so that I can use it to sew together the panels. Then I went ahead and repeated the same steps to make another sleeve. For the back panels, I cast on 40 stitches and actually ended up staying on the tube setting so I could start from the first hook without having it lock up around there. Just be sure to make your yarn go under the next notch as you turn to start your next row so that it has the proper tension. From here, I basically repeated the same steps of 8 rows in the primary color and 2 rows in the secondary color. After doing a total of 83 rows, I cast off the same way and secured the first and last row with slip stitches as I had before. And then I made a second identical panel. For the front panels, it pretty much started exactly the same, but on row 39, I started to decrease on one side every 4th row until I had a total of 83 rows. To do the decrease, I'm still finding the best way to do this. So I have the 39th stitch, and I'm going to put it on the 38th, and I'm going to knit these together. But pretty much I'll just pick up the last loop with a crochet hook and then move it in one. By doing this, it'll create a knit together. As you go through decreasing on every 4th row, you'll start to create a slant on one side. And then I cast off at 83 rows to create 18 inches in length. I also recommend putting a stitch marker on the 39th row so you can have an idea of where the neckline starts. For the second front panel, you'd do the exact same steps except you'd put the decreases on the opposite side. Once you have all of your pieces knit up, you can start sewing them together. To do this, I used a mattress stitch, so there are 3 different ways depending on the direction of your panels. Okay, so I just joined the stitches with stitch markers. First, I did the back 2 panels using a vertical to vertical mattress stitch. You can see from the diagram, it's basically just picking up 2 rows of the crossbars in between the V of the last stitch. So I'll pick up 2 crossbars on each side and alternate. And then pull taut. And I'll go all the way up until I reach the top. Doing this is going to form a small ridge on the back side, but on the front side it's pretty clean. Next, I sewed the shoulder side of the front and back panel together. So now I'm using a horizontal to horizontal mattress stitch, and to do this I'm just picking up the 2 loops that form the V of the knit with my needle and alternating between both sides and then pulling taut. Afterwards, I attached my sleeve to the front and back panel with stitch markers and started the stitches from under the armpit to make a horizontal to vertical mattress stitch all around. And of course, secure your end. And lastly, I used the vertical to vertical mattress stitch again to sew the sides of the front and back panels together. Okay, so I'm going to complete the same steps on this side. From here, I weaved in the majority of the ends just so that it's not too much to clean up later. As you can see, it's now the base of the cardigan and we just have to do the trim. Now moving on to the sleeve cuffs, I used my crochet hook and attached my yarn where the seam on the last row is. I made 1 decreasing round of single crochet and then slip stitched into the start. This decreasing round so that the cuffs kind of form a bell with the sleeve. Once I'm at the start of the round again, I chained 14, and this section is going to create the length of the cuff. So if you want, you can make this shorter or longer. Mine will be roughly 3 inches. And in the second chain from the hook, I half double crocheted all the way across. After reaching the base of the sleeve again, I slip stitched 2 and then skip those 2 slip stitches and then half double crocheted in the back loop only across. And then you chain 2 and you just repeat this process to get the scrunchy cuff. Once you're at the start of the round again, you'll slip stitch these 2 ends together. After finishing the cuffs, I also did 1 decreasing round all around the bottom, and as I went into the neck and front trim, I just did regular single crochets. So each stitch should represent 1 single crochet. And then on the corner parts and the start of row 39, I also chained 2 and then did another single crochet within the same stitch to make a harder edge. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to continue going all the way around doing single crochet decreases until I get to this point, and I'll meet you back there. Okay, so now I've done 1 kind of like round per se of decreasing single crochets in the bottom, and I've made it to the corner stitch again, and now I'm going to just do 1 regular single crochet in each of these loops going all the way up. I will do 2 chains first and then start in this one, and then as I go up I will do another 2 chains in the corner. I believe I already put a stitch marker in there, just have to find it. Yeah, okay, so this is the corner. So I'll do another 2 single crochets in this one just so that it has more of an edge, and then I'll continue all the way around, do another 2 single crochets and an extra stitch in this one, and then connect it in this corner stitch with another 2 chains, and then connect it into this round. And then I'll actually start on the trim going all the way around here. Okay, so I'm just going to chain 2. And this will create kind of like a harder corner. So now I will go in here. And it's going to be 1 single crochet. And I'll go into here. Okay, now that I've joined the edge together, I'm going to plan out where I want my buttons to be. So yeah, and also don't worry about the edges curling. It'll all work out once the ribbing is there, because that'll like add some more structure. Now usually you'll put your buttons on the left side for the wearer, or the right side if you're looking at it. So on the other side is actually where your buttonholes are going to be. So I placed my stitch markers on the left side where the buttonholes will be. I end up changing the position a bit. So continuing with my working yarn from the base round, I chained 7. And in the second chain from the hook, I started making single crochets all the way to the base and then slip stitching 2. And then basically just continued the single crochet ribbing all the way across until I get to the first button position. Here is a bit less than half of the ribbing done. I think it's looking really good. Just going to continue up until this point. Now that I'm in the row where I want to put my first buttonhole, I'm seeing how many stitches in length my button would be. I can see that it's about 4 stitches long, so I'm going to do 1 less and make the hole 3 stitches long, because we want it to be a little tighter so that the button doesn't slip out. So after skipping the first 2 slip stitches I made, I single crochet in the back loop only, chain 3, single crochet in the back loop only twice, chain 1, turn, and then continuing my ribbing. So I'll continue making single crochet ribbing until I get to the next buttonhole, where I'll repeat that same process. And here I was just making sure that the button would go through the hole, and I also ended up landmarking where my buttons would be, and I ended up only using 3 buttons. Okay, so I just finished making the last buttonhole and I'm going to start on the bottom edge trim. I made the buttonhole really close to the edge because I want the, I don't want it to like separate too much when I have the edge trim, and I'm only going to do maybe like 4 stitches for the ribbing length. So right now I'm actually going to chain 5. Okay, and then I'm going to continue my ribbing going this way now. And in the second chain from the hook, I started doing single crochets and then slip stitching into the base of the cardigan, turning and then single crocheting across again, chaining 1 and continuing. This is what I want because, yeah, if you have the buttonhole too far away from the edge, then it's gonna like kind of splay out at the ends. So now I'm slip stitching 2, just like before, and then I'm gonna turn and single crochet 4, chain 1, single crochet 4, From here, I just repeated the same process until I made it all the way to the front of the cardigan again. Here we are at the final row of the bottom ribbing. This next bit is totally optional if you want to do it. I think it makes the edges look a little bit cleaner and a little bit more knit-like. So from here, I chained 2 and then single crocheted in that same space. And then I single crocheted into all the stitches, and not the holes because we want to bring these stitches together. So I'm actually sticking my hook into the actual stitch rather than the loop that's being lifted, and this will like make everything really tight and make it so that it's not as spaced apart. So I went ahead and put a single crochet in all the edge stitches of the front and bottom ribbing, as well as chaining 2 and single crocheting into that same stitch to create a hard edge in any corners. You can already kind of tell the difference between the before and after of doing this from the left and right side in this clip. So I did the same thing on the bottom of the cuffs. From here, I weaved in any remaining ends. And I didn't get a clip of it, but I actually also did cut the floating yarn in the tube sections and then I tied them together. Because my yarn is acrylic and I am an adult, I used a lighter to secure any of those like loose frayed ends that were peeking out. But that's totally up to you what you want to do with those. You can leave them, you can tie them, you can weave them in, you can use a little bit of like heat if it's acrylic yarn, you can use yarn glue. Totally up to you how you want to secure it. And the last and final step is to add your buttons. And if you followed along, I'd love to see your creations. You can tag me on TikTok or Instagram. And bye for now.